You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
They say the night is darkest before the dawn, Brendan, but Dusk Till Dawn is here. What are your first takes? We've seen full preview season weekend. I think we've seen every card now. In fact, if you haven't seen it, Brendan, the last legendary, the last card I think unaccounted for was just seen, and it looks like it's Crown of Providence, a reprint of Crown of Providence, which makes a lot of sense. We've seen these legendaries be reprinted. But anyway, that aside, what's your first impressions after preview weekend for Dusk Till Dawn?
I think that Dusk Till Dawn has the best art we've ever seen in Flesh and Blood. It's very visually striking. I know a lot of people will, go. The easy picks are these figments, of course. They look fantastic, but I think these Shadow Runeblade cards also look amazing. And just in general, it feels like a step up. That's probably not why people listen to us, is to hear the art critique. But overall, I'm happy and excited, like especially with some of the direction that was taken with Levia, but also finally getting to flush out Vincent. I think Vincent, looked really underwhelming when we saw it in a vacuum. And now that we have more context, I'm definitely a lot more excited about it. Definitely not Chain. I'm not getting my Chain vibes quite yet, but it's early days at that. Honestly, one of the cards I was most excited for was a warrior card, and then Hayden promptly reminded me of why it sucks in modern day Flesh and Blood. But hey, what about you? What are your thoughts on Dusk Till Dawn so far? Has it reinvigorated your passion for Levia? Hayden actually used to be a Levia main. It was one of our premier Gauntlet counter decks to Chain back in the day.
I spent a lot of time on Levia. Actually, first of all, what's the warrior card that you're talking about?
I don't even want to say it because I'm just going to get flamed. It was Decimated Great Axe. It was just turning a blue into that, translating your extra blues into that much attack seems good. But then you think about it in the context of Oldhim also having access to Crown of Seeds, Oldhim's ability, etc. Also having inherent poppers on all of the cards that pretty much exist in the deck. And it's like, okay, this is nothing close to that. Because I was thinking more defensive warrior.
3-5.
Yeah, grindy, fatigue, but you're right. It will likely automatically lose the matchup against Dramai, which is going to be a premier deck in this upcoming meta, most likely. And it's just, even if it does have this weapon that's it looks shiny right now. It gets the juices flowing. It likely will not be able to compete with what Oldhim was doing in the previous meta whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, I think though you are I have heard that card, that Great Decimator, is a card that people were excited about, and I think internally may have been a card that they were excited about. So we'll see. You can change up your 15 card sideboard effectively, right? You can change up your plan. Maybe you have a defensive plan and an offensive warrior plan.
I like the card, right? I like the card in warrior. It gets me excited to look at a class like warrior and then maybe reimagine it in a new way. And we've talked about it a lot as Flesh and Blood has grown and we've had more sets come in. But one of the more interesting things about Class Constructed is sitting across from a hero and not knowing exactly what game plan they'll take. It definitely makes it much more interesting as the opposing player, I think.
Yeah, I mean, from my side on that note, I mean, Dusk Till Dawn, really excited after this preview weekend. I think one of the things I really wanted to talk about in this sort of intro is this idea that, LSS have focused on a set that is light and shadow from a talent and a class perspective, and we get minimal to no support for the other classes, which is an interesting one. I actually think we have a Commander Cookout question on it, so we can kind of bank it till then. But that's one of my first sort of things, because at the very start of Dusk Till Dawn, we saw these specializations. There was the Briar, there's the Ultimate specialization. We're like, okay, are we actually getting support for everything? But this is a set that gives support for light, shadow, brute, Runeblade, illusionist, and warrior primarily, and those class specific heroes even a little bit less. It is really focused around the talented heroes. So it's gonna be interesting. I mean, as someone who's played quite a bit of Levia back in the Monarch days, I really like a lot of the cards we've seen. It's the one that's got me the most excited. We're going to talk about Shadow this week, episode 117 of Arsenal Plus. We are diving into the Shadow cards and reviewing sort of our first thoughts on those, but Shadow is definitely the side of the equation that's got me more interested so far.
Yeah, I think that, so the reason why Levia has me so excited is because of our previous testing with the deck. Mm-hmm. I genuinely felt like the damage output, the quantity of output of Levia was a lot higher than pretty much everybody gave it credit for. And Mansant was actually a bit of a testament to this. Like, Mansant was beating Briars with that. I don't know if he was doing it consistently, but if you played against that deck and it's drawn decently well, you've been like, holy shit, like, what is this here? I've never heard of this. And it's absolutely decimating me. And I felt like Levia was existing at a point where it just needed a little bit of a tune up, you know, it needed that outsiders, or sorry, that, the treatment that Ranger recently got, you know. If Levia got that, I felt like it could genuinely be a competitive deck, and maybe that's it. I want to talk about something, Hayden. Just the disparity in our spoilers this season. I feel like mine was way cooler and way better than yours.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. Yep.
Oh,
my card sucked.
Yeah, some people are memeing me because I put Vincent Staple. I mean, you guys get Chains of Mephetis as your spoiler card with no context on any shadow cards that exist, and you tell me what you can infer from that card. 0 for 3, maybe somewhat blank text looks good. I don't know. It's hard to say at this point, but yeah, that piece of equipment you got, Hayden, is pretty ridiculous. The scowling. Yeah, if you flesh bag. It's actually, I think that sounds like your nickname in high school.
it's the FAB player's equivalent of resting bitch face, scowling flesh bag. Yeah, I mean, obviously very lucky to ever be given a legendary by LSS. You know, not quite Crown of Providence, but I think this is a brute staple for the foreseeable future, for forever. You know, I think this piece of equipment is great. If you want to go check it out, our preview videos, ours are a little bit different. Brendan actually gave some analysis to his card. I filmed a 60-second bad video, but I didn't talk about the card at all. I think the card is really, really good, and I think this kind of mini, almost like stalagmite effect that it has is really strong. Plus, it blocks for 2, and kind of the thing that Brute struggles with the most is these go wide decks that can really put pressure on you. You know, the ninjas, the Briars of the world. So, I think this is a massive upgrade for those matchups for Rhinar and probably for Levia as well, but definitely for Rhinar.
Do you see intimidating with this piece of equipment? Is it equivalent to making your opponent discard a card?
No, like if it said opponent discards a card, that would be better because they can Arsenal this way. So it's not quite that good, but it can you can use this strategically. The hardest thing this card is going to be when you use it, and how you get the most value out of it. But that was the same with a card like Stalagmite, for instance. It's all about really efficient use.
I guess the random effect, makes it maybe. There's definitely some cards in the game that you don't want to arsenal. I feel like that's less and less these days. Maybe they just have to arsenal a somewhat inefficient card at that. But I think back to the Tome of Harvests of the world and how devastating that can be. Although, rightly, you said it earlier, Crown of Providence has changed that issue quite a bit. So yeah.
What you really want to get out of it is basically 5 to 8 damage. You want to stop them from being able to play their Revelin Runeblood into their Rosetta Thorn as Viscera. You want to get 5 damage out of it, for instance, in that situation. So you want to be taking probably their second to last card, a lot of the time. So it's going to be strategic use. Anyway, Brendan, let's as I say, episode 117. The Shadow cards of Dusk Till Dawn is where we're going today. We're going to talk through, our first thoughts and how we might look at start building some of these decks. I've already started theory crafting with particularly Levia, but even Vincent as well. Before that, if you haven't checked out our spoiler videos, they're both up on YouTube. You can go check them out. You can see my terrible acting and Brendan's analysis, in-depth analysis of Chains of... what's your card called again? Chains of
Mephetis, which, by the way, is I think that the
homage?
Yeah, the original callback is, I think it's Mephistopheles or something. I don't know, it's some biblical thing. I think I could be saying something from a game, but they all these like games and card games, video games, they all take from this name. So in Diablo, it's like Mephisto. In FAB, it's now Mephetis. It's like it's all calling back to the same sort of like deity of some sort of old story.
The MCG card is from Legends. It's Chains of
might be Mephistopheles.
I think it's Mephistopheles. I think you're right.
So that's what I'm calling from. I think that those are all calling from an original story as well, but I could be wrong. But
makes sense.
Yeah, and a nomenclature you see quite a bit in games.
Very cool. I like that Alex is doing this. I mean, you said the Figment art is the low-hanging fruit. I mean, I love the Figment art. So
I thought you were going to say you love the art of Chains of Mephetis. Some people do.
It's cool. War of the Monarch. This is the Dusk Till Dawn pre-release effectively is on this weekend. So you can get down and draft Monarch. That's definitely my plan this weekend. And hopefully, check with your local RGS. Not everyone has, I think, the Dusk Till Dawn packs. I think they had to order them separately and they could order up to okay. So, if you're going to go along and you're really looking to get some early Dusk Till Dawn packs, probably just check with your LGS. They actually have these as prizes. But you can also get these these foil young hero promos from the new set. Skirmish Season 6 kicks off July 29th. So not far away. Brendan, let's talk about the big one though. Ban and restricted announcement. Obviously, we had this preview weekend. Everyone's hyped. They're on their high from seeing Dusk Till Dawn previews. And then we get this announcement, the scheduled ban and suspended announcement. And the big one, of course, is that Pulse of Eisenloft is unbanned, Brendan.
Thank God.
So, Ultimate Grandfather of Eternity and Winter's Well. Yeah, sunsets into Living Legend. And we have, a couple of, Pulse of Eisenloft obviously gets unbanned because of that. And, not relevant right now, but potentially relevant in the future. Bloodshed Skelata, Brendan.
Skelata, yeah. I was going to say, don't forget about that one.
From suspended until Viscerai becomes Living Legend to just straight up banned. So the hopes of potentially Skelata coming back and Sonata being banned or anything, they've just made the change. Skelata's gone for good. I mean, the equipment is so powerful, and obviously why they've reprinted or printed this new piece of equipment for Runeblade in this set.
Thieves of Joy, they are. Thieves of Joy. I was actually really disappointed to see that. There's a new, the new Viscerai specialization. I got really excited when I first saw it, and then I saw that it says attack action instead of non-attack action. Bequest the Vast Beyond. I genuinely believe, Hayden, if this card could say non-attack action, it would be fine because it's a Skelata that you have to draw. That's fine. I
don't know, man. It's pretty good.
It's good. Don't get me wrong. It's good, but I don't think it's nowhere near the power level of Skelata. I mean, it would lead to these Viscerai decks playing an endgame plan where they arsenal this card, then they draw the Sonata after pitching it and effectively do what they used to. But I feel like that knocks the strategy down a peg enough in modern day Flesh and Blood. It would be okay. But LSS, they don't like fun. They don't like fun.
Well, speaking of not liking fun, Bullseye Braces. So there was a lot of discussion, I guess, prior to this, over the last few weekends, even through, of course, the callings that have happened since Pro Tour Baltimore, the power of Lexi and what LSS might potentially hit to give it a slight nerf. There was a lot of discussion from Three of a Kind to Codex, of course. One that was, I know, pretty big in some of my friends was Endless Arrow, the power of Endless Arrow, what that does for just these kind of crazy pop-off turns. And in the end, they go with Bullseye Braces. And if you haven't seen this already, you can go to fabtcg.com and see their kind of reasoning. They give a pretty big reasoning. I mean, I'll just kind of cover some of the key points for why they chose to, or their LSS's reasoning for Bullseye Braces ban is, with Ultim rotating out some of the decks that had, in LSS's view, adapted and come up with great plans or were favorable in the form of Azuri, Dromai in particular. They had come up with these plans, or even Azalea, they now have lost one of their worst matchups. So that kind of unshackles them a little bit. Their other thing is that Bullseye Braces is one of these sip cards, as they say, starts in play, stays in play. So basically on board value, something that we talk a lot about, which 100% I get. Bullseye Braces can be worth 7 to 8 damage, pretty easily. And especially on these big turns, it can be worth more if you get to get the Endless Arrow back and arsenal it. So those are kind of the reasons. I think, Brendan, my first kind of take is not sure this is enough to bring some of the other aggro decks into the format. My kind of view is that Lexi is the best aggro deck, and it's an aggro deck that also has, and this is something that LSS don't kind of talk about in this this ban and suspended announcement for Bullseye Braces or Lexi's power, is they don't talk about the fact that probably the best aggro deck and one of the best disruption decks as well. But we've seen this being played mostly as an aggressive deck because it's so powerful. The need for disruption hasn't been there. But this really doesn't, in my view, I don't think this opens the door very much for other aggro decks to come in, which is a bit of a problem.
So if I was going to read between the lines and LSS simp a bit here, what I would say is that they went with this very soft sort of light ban to Lexi because the new heroes, the new cards are so powerful that there will be an aggro deck or a mid-range deck that can compete, that will come into the meta and will be able to compete on the power level of Lexi. What credence do you give that, sir?
I mean, it's hard to say right now, right? We've just had the preview season for Dusk Till Dawn. My first take is I would disagree with that, but I mean, we've got time, right? We'll see. This is a place for them to start. This means that this is the Nationals meta that we're gonna take on. So this is, I think, the next ban suspended announcement isn't until September 19th. So this is going to be the format that we're playing for Nationals, basically with this bullseye braceless Lexi deck. I think kind of my other kind of critique, they talk about Azuri, Azalea, Katsu, Dorinthia, and their bad sort of matchups into Ultim and them kind of being unshackled. I think even when it comes to Dromai as well, like this idea that Dromai has a good Lexi matchup. I mean, we saw time and time again on camera that the Lexi's adapted. This is the thing. Lexi has so many tools and so many things it can do. We talked about just before the ice package it can play, where it just plays a straight aggro package. We saw the players from Hong Kong show up at Calling Singapore with this package to even beat Ultim, with these fatigue packages to beat Ultim. Lexi has so many tools available to it that I think, the kind of simplification of, this is what the meta looked like at the end, and the Lexi decks will look the same, and so there's tools to beat them. I just don't think that's true. I think they have so many tools available to them. Azuri, the perception that Azuri is their worst matchup. I think we've even seen Lexis be able to build into this more like ice package, Kazakh Ice Quake, and take advantage of what Azuri's trying to do, and make their game plan less viable. So look, it's going to be interesting. I mean, obviously we've got testing before we get to Nationals. I'm sure people will come up with plans. Hopefully, maybe Prism is going to be a really bad matchup for Lexi. We don't know. So, but yeah, I mean, that's what it is. Bullseye Braces is the ban.
Yep. We talked about it prior to coming on the podcast, but I definitely respect the theory behind it, like the fundamental theory where it's like, hey, let's knock down the premier aggro deck a peg so that we can potentially open up the meta for other decks and, our new cards to come in and exist and compete as well. Whether this ban will have that effect or, banning Bullseye bracers is effective enough to actually do that. I guess we'll just have to see. It's hard to really evaluate a ban in the context of so many new cards coming into the game, right? Like if it was
a living legend,
exactly. Yeah, probably debatably one of the most important living legends to ever happen. To be honest.
Yeah, and I just want to put this out there. I've kind of said my piece to why I think maybe this isn't the right call on the ban and suspended announcement. But also my view changes all the time. I was talking to James in Singapore, and he had said that he felt that, maybe the meta is a good place, and he even wanted to unban cards, not ban cards, which got me excited. Tease. Yeah. But, I think at the time I was like, yeah, I think I agree, and then I think now seeing Dusk Till Dawn, my view is after the cards I've seen Dusk Till Dawn, that my current view basically is that I'm not sure that this is enough to allow other aggro decks to play and be enough of a kind of challenge to decks like Azuri and Dromai, or give them enough. I'll tell you what though, one hero that does get a little bit of a buff from this, Brendan, is definitely Kano. So you must be happy.
From the bracers being banned? I mean, what about all this other garbage that's in this set? I was like, oh, you should have seen the memes in my local FAB chat. I was like just shitting on Wizard constantly. I was like, okay, guys, relax.
I see you the chess piece, the new Runeblade chess piece, and just said Brendan crying inside. Okay, awesome. Well, let's actually, Brendan, you got something big to talk about. It is July, so why don't you tell us about the FAB Fitness Challenge, because it is underway.
FAB Fitness Challenge number 2. I guess we'll make this a yearly thing with July. Same thing as the last fitness challenge. We keep it pretty loose because overall it's mindfulness, it's a mindset change, and it's all about just doing a little bit more. There's no rigidity to it. There's no schedule. We're not focusing on a specific goal as in like a weight loss or card. It's just what trying to be a little bit better than you were the previous month before, and ultimately progressing towards a healthy lifestyle. So what we're doing this month, which is exciting, is Brody Spurlock, Flesh and Blood Prodigy. Actually lives about 10 to 15 minutes away from me. So Brody will be with me. Actually, we're working out every single day, which is awesome. Already been doing it with 3 days for him. The dude is an absolute savage. Probably one of the most just inhuman people I've ever met in my life, Hayden. This guy, he never asks how long the run is. He never asks how hot it is outside, and he never complains about literally anything. And I'm just like, dude, does he not feel anything? It's ridiculous. Just totally game and an absolute beast. So he's going to be working out with me every single day for the 30 days, and we'll be doing content, documenting it, things like that. And then, of course, all throughout the community, Hayden also doing stuff for the FAB Fitness Challenge, but also many other content creators that were, participated during last year's FAB Fitness Challenge, coming back for number 2. But definitely encourage you all to get involved if you haven't before. It's a fun thing to do.
What are some ways to get involved, Brennan? Where can we, if I wanted to get involved, where can I talk to like-minded people? Where can I get some support? Where could I engage? Yeah,
so the number one way to get involved is just to join the conversation. On Twitter, we use a hashtag FAB Fitness Challenge. And if you search up that hashtag, you'll see all the connected posts and people. I recommend doing that if you're looking for people to connect with or just for information. If you want to connect with Hayden and I directly during this month, you can join the Arsenal Pass Patreon. We have a specific channel dedicated to it. Same channel as last year if you're part of it last year. And of course, if you can't join our Patreon this month because of financial reasons or monetary reasons, you can just DM me on Twitter and I can help you out for the month. But we have a channel going there, and we stay quite up to date in it.
Yep, get people in there. Otherwise, I guess and what are your focuses for the month? Maybe just talk a little bit about what are you focused on for the month of July.
So Brody and I have a pretty interesting schedule. We're doing weightlifting every single day, and then we do a bit of sauna, a bit of pool as well, and then we go out and we run. We do this trail run out in the Texas 100+ degree heat. So for you Celsius people out there, that's above body temperature. Do about 2-3 mile run there, just repeat that. And the goal is really, the ideology behind it is that at the end of this month, it's to just you really dedicate yourself to doing something genuinely challenging. And then as you move past July and move back into real life, you have all of the tools and knowledge you need to sort of implement this in the most sustainable way possible and in the way that works for you the best. But for this month, the goal for me and Brody is just to become monsters, we're having fun with it. It's an interesting time in both of our lives. Brody's out of school at this point, and I'm working much less than I used to. So I don't know. It just feels really good to be able to go after that for a month and, spend as much time as we do on it. Definitely not necessary, but just a fun challenge to get after.
Cool. Yeah. And I saw you posted to Twitter about the challenge as well, and kind of, a bit of a snapshot to your journey. And I think it's cool if people want to go and check and see. There's a lot of people already posting, some of their goals this month and the things that they want to do with FAB Fitness Challenge. So it's always a great community thing to get you back into the, maybe looking for motivation, maybe just looking for camaraderie, maybe there's also things people are getting out of this. So yeah, looking forward to it. My focus is more around food and balance this month. My workout schedule, I've actually, although Brendan, I did tweet, I've now added flag football on a Monday to my kind of workout routine. So I get a little bit of team sport. I haven't played a team sport in a long time. And also, just some extra, I think I burned like 600 calories in my first game, a lot of running.
That's a lot of running. I shattered my nose in flag football when I was a kid. It was terrible. I actually did a rhinoplasty when I was like 18 years old to reconstruct all that bone. But yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah. The food stuff is, I think we'll talk about on a Patreon pod because it's just a lengthy topic. But for me, I put food and diet above everything else, above all of the exercise. All of that is trying to maintain a healthy diet and stay away from processed foods and stuff like that. It's just really, really important to me. Anyway, I digress.
Cool. Come on to Cookout time. We've got a pretty interesting question related to Dusk Till Dawn, really. And just want to say, if you do want to get your questions in for Commander Cookout, I think we've got a couple of questions in the backlog, but we definitely have space for questions in the next sort of 4 to 6 weeks. So if you want to get your question, you can drop them in the YouTube comments below. Let us know it is a question for the Commander Cookout. You can tweet at us. You can message us on Twitter. You can, if you're in the Arsenal Pass Discord, there is a channel for you to drop your questions in. This is where today's question comes from. And you can even email us at arsenalpassfab@gmail.com. So this question comes from AJ's Core. This is from a friend of mine out of Singapore, who unfortunately, Alex, we didn't get to catch up as much during the Singapore calling. But this question is, the supplemental set primarily has support for just 4 heroes. It almost feels like a non-draftable draft set. For players like me who only have the time and resources to focus on a small handful of heroes, Mech and Wizard, this set feels very meh. Should LSS provide more regular, consistent support to all heroes, considering the casual player who doesn't have the resources to play the new kids on the block?
Follow-up question off of the question here: Is this a fundamental issue with the hero-centric game design that Flesh and Blood has? You have expansions come out, and you have entire sets come out where there are people that maybe focus on a specific card pool, a specific hero, a specific class that maybe eventually end up feeling left out.
So I will flip that question, and also with Alex's question here, and say the opposite. What if you had 4 sets a year where your hero or the class that you like to focus on was represented every single time, and every 3 months you have to buy new product to keep up, or you have to? Is that friendly for a more casual player base as well? So I think if LSS are moving to 4 sets a year, three, the 2 draftable and supplemental, or 2 and 2, 3 to 4 sets a year. Is that realistic? And I think that is kind of the question. I think if 1 set per year doesn't offer support for a wide range of heroes, or doesn't provide, the generics that could be of reasonable interest, I personally think that's okay. And I think that's a good way to give people maybe the reprieve from the product. I actually think it's a big risk from LSS. We talked about this, I think.
Yeah,
I want to say
it's definitely a huge risk
with Uprising. Yeah, like maybe it was Uprising. I can't remember the set we talked about this. I focused about this a lot, but to just basically say, okay, there's only support for these 3 classes. You're an existing player who plays mech. You don't get support for mech this set. Like there's a big call, right? Because they could potentially alienate players. But I think in a draftable set, at least they're offering a limited play experience, right? This is the first supplemental set we've seen where they don't offer the support for all classes or all players potentially, and that is a big call. I think though, if this is once per year that they do this, where it's a bit of a narrow focus, it's not draftable, and it is just a narrow focus on the heroes or talents or support, I mean, I think that's okay. I think it's interesting, and for the more casual player base who are maybe focusing on certain heroes, I think that gives them less things to worry about and keep up with. On the flip side, for more, I guess maybe the competitive side, or more engaged players who play a wider range of heroes, it gives them something completely new to dabble into. So I don't know. Again, it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I was very surprised, I will say, when I found out that there was basically no support outside of these heroes and talents.
A few things. So like if we follow the supplemental set model of trying to support every single class and debatably every single hero, if you zoomed out, I don't know how far you'd have to zoom out, but maybe it's 10 years, maybe it's 20 years. Eventually, if there was multiple formats, it was like, all these formats were serviceable, Living Legend format, and effectively all heroes were legal in some format sometime, there would probably get to a point where there was so many, if Flesh and Blood kept developing classes and heroes at this sort of somewhat linear rate, there would come a time in the future where it would just be sort of impossible to support all of the classes, all the heroes in a meaningful way in a single supplemental set. So I think it doesn't ultimately mesh with, how frequently we do get heroes and we do get new classes. For this supplemental set only containing, Shadow Brute, Warrior Brute, we talked about the heroes before. I think it's much, much more interesting. Like when I look at this set versus when I looked at Dynasty or I looked at Everfest, my creative juices are flowing infinitely more, right? It's not like I have 2 to 3 broken cards and I'm like, okay, that just goes in my Viscerai deck. It just makes it a little bit better.
You've got depth.
And if we look back at Everfest specifically, one of my biggest issues with that set is there were hits and there were misses. Like there were some big hits, like Prism got great support. The Rune Blades got awesome support, like things that genuinely added a lot to the class. I mean, specifically Prism with the Auras totally changed how Illusionist played. But then you had like Brute and it was like, okay, we got some powerful cards, but outside of that, it's just like, it felt like you just kind of got left out on this set. And I don't think it's as interesting where you have a very deep card pool like you do in Dusk Till Dawn here with the classes that are represented. But like you said, I think it's a risky play because, I mean, this is one of those sets where if you're not interested in these classes, I mean, they're not going to buy it, Hayden. People like there's going to be plenty of people who just go, okay, it's not for me, and they'll wait. And there's a bit of a duality right there because that could be the more beneficial model to us as players, like me and you, Hayden, because we have these sets that are more interesting, they have more depth. But ultimately, there are going to be players who there's an upcoming new Flesh and Blood set. They haven't got new cards in a while. They're looking for cards to go into their Ranger deck or something, which I know recently got support. And they might, with this set not having in them, effectively having to skip it, that's a mentality thing. They might get a little bit bored. They're like, wow, Flesh and Blood hasn't serviced me in a long enough time, and there's some new shiny thing to go after. So I think there's a bit of a duality there. If we want to look at another game that has existed for a long time that effectively serviced, a multi-class or multi-hero game every single set. Look at Hearthstone. Hearthstone did that. Every single Hearthstone set, it services all the classes. And I think that if you want to sort of, reflect on both of them, think about if you've played Hearthstone, if you've been a part of that model, think about how those expansions felt to you versus something like a Dusk Till Dawn. Ultimately, at this point, I don't know which model is better, but me as a player that's invested in Flesh and Blood, that has access to all the heroes, has played most of the heroes, has access to most of the cards, this set is much more exciting to me than something like a Dynasty.
Yeah. Depth, I think you kind of nailed it when you said like depth versus width. And I think that is kind of, I think if LSS are changing it up and it's got to fit the long-term model, there needs to be some of this depth. And it adds such an interesting dynamic. Like looking through these cards, there's so many options for how you could build Bolton, Livia, Vincent, all these heroes. So Prism. And you get a little bit of a sprinkle on top for some other heroes, but just a little bit. Will LSS maybe give a little bit more width next time in this kind of supplemental set where, maybe at least everyone gets 1 or 2 cards. I don't know, maybe the generics help sort of that in some degree, but like I say, one of this kind of set per year, I think actually works well in the grand scheme of things, but we'll see.
I wonder how far this set was off of being draftable. Because like they said, and I agree with them, it looks almost draftable, right? It's like, how far away are we from that? And do we I wonder if supplemental sets, because it doesn't really feel like a supplemental set. He's totally right when you hit upon that point. It feels like a new set, and that's why it's so exciting. Yeah. I guess that's why it's exciting, because it doesn't feel supplemental. It feels like we're getting new Shadow Brutes, like a new Shadow Runeblade. Like those, they genuinely feel new and fresh. So I wonder if there was a way that, maybe we could implement this into Monarch and make it a somewhat draftable set, as like a splash in pack or something like that. I don't know.
Probably do it as sealed. You probably do like 4 packs of Monarch, 2 of this or something. I don't know. Could be interesting. Right. Let's move on to the main topic. It's time to talk about Shadow a bit more depth. And like I say, this pod we're going to cover Shadow. Next pod we'll cover Light, and at some point we'll cover the generics, non-talented cards as well. First of all, let's just gather top line thoughts on the heroes and where they might sort of sit, what you're excited about, what you're not excited about. Maybe talk about some strategies, things like that. So where do you want to start?
Yeah, so I want to start with Levia. Levia is I'm the most excited about Levia. And the reason I'm excited about Levia is because of the flip card that comes out of the inventory. Levia Redeemed, is it? Yeah, Levia Redeemed. And let me flip this over. And it's also Blasphemet Levia Consumed. I can read this out, by the way. So Levia Redeemed is a shadow demi hero with 4 intellect, 8 health. Legendary Levia specialization says, action, turn all cards in your banished zone face down, transform into Levia Redeemed. Activate this ability only while this is in your inventory. If you have 13 or more cards with blood debt in your banished zone, it says cards you own lose blood debt. So before I even go to the second side, Hayden, this is the one that had me the most interested because it looks like, at first glance, it looks like a bit of a free roll, right? It takes up a single slot in your sideboard. And, when you're down, you're in the late game, you've been pumping the blood debt, etc. Now you can play this card, and you can even heal off of it sometimes. It seems absolutely crazy. So I came into this, into this podcast, and I mentioned this to Hayden before he hopped on. Hayden has, you've played with this card a little bit. So tell me why it's not as crazy as I think it is, and tell me a little bit about this number 13 when it comes to blood debt cards.
Oh, look, I mean, first of all, the fact that when we saw this preview, these demi heroes effectively is very cool. This very idea cool. That, it kind of addresses maybe some of the problems with Levia rather than just printing a new Levia and saying, that Levia sucked, let's move on. This is kind of an addendum almost to Levia in a way to maybe help Levia be more competitive. The Levia Redeemed and the Blasphemet side, both very, very good cards, I think. And like you say, one inventory slot for these 2 cards. So that, just to clarify how this works, you have Levia Redeemed is the 1 card with the flip side of that card being Blasphemet Levia Consumed. That is, so it's 1 card. You just put that in your inventory, so you can start with that in your sideboard of your deck when you play the game. And when you can trigger the ability, either the action side of Levia or the triggered ability side of Levia Consumed, you can activate. You can put it into play. You replace your hero effectively. So it's very cool. It is hard to get off. Like, it is not as easy. I think the way I look at it, the Levia Redeem side is a little bit of a get out of jail free card once you kind of, like if what Ebb and Fold used to be when you would you couldn't pay your blood debt. So Levia Redeem can obviously, as an action, as long as you have those 13 or more cards of blood debt in your banish zone, which you probably are if you're at the point of almost dying, then you can transform into Levia Redeemed and you lose blood debt, right? So great. And obviously you turn them all face down. It is, I think the 13 cards in blood debt means you obviously have to have a really high blood debt count, or the game has to be quite long. So I think the kind of, it's not just like assumed every game that you're going to be able to do this. I think it is, there's some setup there. There's some understanding of what the game state's going to be, of what your game plan is and what your deck list looks like. So it's not just like a complete free roll, like you were saying, but it is really good. And I think if you build correctly and you understand the game plans, you're going to be able to flip into Levia Redeemed or Levia Consumed almost every time.
So is Blasphemous Levia Consumed the better version of this? So let me just read that out. Legendary Levia Specialization, Debbie Hero, 4 intellect, 13 life. It says, while this is in your inventory, when blood debt reduces your life to 13 exactly, you may transform into Blasphemous Levia Consumed. Once each turn, you may play a card with blood debt from your banish zone. Whenever a card is put into your banish zone, turn it face down. If you would lose life from blood debt, instead banish the top card of your deck. So effectively mill it, right? Because you banish it and turn it upside down. Is this the better version of it? Is this one you're going to be able to hit more consistently? Because blood debt, it ticks incrementally, right? It ticks card by card.
Yeah. So you could be on 15 life. You have 5 blood debt in your banish zone. They all trigger separately, so you can let the first 2 trigger, and then before the third one triggers, there's a triggered ability on Blasphemous. You transform into Blasphemous Levia Consumed, and then move on with your life. But is it the more consistent? No, I actually think Redeemed is the easier side to hit, because you can once you get to 13 cards and you get reasonably low on life, like you can always do that. This side, you have to specifically at the end of turn when blood debt happens be in the range. Like your opponent can understand that as well. They can play into that. But I think this is probably the more powerful side for just a proactive. Both sides are really good though.
A little bit more to unpack with Blasphemous Levia Consumed. So you have to take that damage from blood debt, right? So you're not. It's actually not a 4 intellect 13 life hero, because you'll take. I mean, if you had 1 or 2 blood debt, you had the amount that took you exactly down to 13. But most likely you're going to have to be able to take damage from blood debts and not trigger Levia's ability. And then you're going to take the amount that would take you down to 13. Then you're going to have to take the additional cards, the additional blood debt that's left to trigger, right? So you'll likely.
I don't think you do, right? Because so you transform into this.
Oh, do you start banishing? You start banishing after
start
13?
Banishing instead.
Okay. Yeah. So. I misread it. I mean, it's a lot of text to read, to be honest. I was like,
it is. And both these sides are a lot of text.
Yeah. Trying to wrap my head around it. But that's much better than I thought. Because you start milling yourself almost immediately after hitting it. And
then you get the chain ability. You get to play a card from Banish each turn. Like really, that is really good. And obviously you can only play the cards that were already existing in Banish, but you can kind of get into this game plan where I think the Levia Consumed side is like the super aggressive potential game plan, and then you flip into Consumed, and then you have still like gas in your Banish zone, and you're not really concerned about milling because you're just like trying to kill them at that point. Or the flip side, Redeemed feels like more of maybe the control style get out of jail free potential side. So
yeah, it seems, I don't know. What do you think about demi heroes in general? So it kind of feels like a leveling up to an extent. I don't know. It just reminds me a lot of like Grand Archive, how the heroes level up. And I don't know do you think we'll see it with future heroes in Flesh and Blood? Do you think we'll see this sort of transforming into an alternate version of the hero, which is effectively a level up, right? You meet some condition that's at a later point in the game, and you become debatably, and I think it's almost objectively in this scenario, more powerful version of your original hero.
Yeah, I think we'll see them again, right? I don't think they're going to one-time print this and move on. It's obviously something in their design space that they want to explore. How much we'll see it, I think they'll be really conservative of how they use this, at least in the start. I don't think it'd be like Planeswalkers and Magic. That was kind of the first thing I thought was Planeswalkers, a bit of Magic. They got overprinted, and I think there's so many of them. It might be a bit more like Companions if you've played Magic before, but it feels Yeah, I know. This feels really unique, I think, and it feels quite well thought out. But I think it will be something they use strategically. Anyway, I mean, this card's great. I think if we're going to, for the sake of the pod, getting through everything, I think we probably need to move on. But my takeaway is Levy redeemed / consumed, very good, and going to see a lot of play.
Yeah, I actually just want to flip the script on you and ask you what got you excited about Shadow. What are you most excited for from what you've seen?
Yeah, I just think it's I thought Levia was in the spot beforehand where you have good numbers on cards, but Blood Debt is such a burden, and your opponent gets to almost play your side of the table sometimes, which is not where you want to be in Flesh and Blood. You don't want to let your opponent almost, play out your strategy or counter your strategy just inherently. So I think that was quite a difficult thing about Blood Debt and the way Levia worked. So that kind of held it back a bit. I think now with particularly Levy Redeem, but also a lot of the cards that enable you to change up your strategies, I think there's just better numbers involved. There's more avenues to explore. The decks could look. I honestly think Levy can be built in almost any way now. That's very interesting. I think from a Levy side, that's what's got me most interested. I think from Vincent's side, it's the way to use this hero ability. It's not a may, it's a must on Vincent's hero ability. You have to banish at the start of each turn if you have the card, but you get the rune chant regardless, even if you don't banish a shadow card. And what do your turn structures look like? I think Vincent looks like, I think it was like, oh, it's definitely not chain like you said. And then I think the first reaction was like, oh, this actually looks a little bit unexciting. But actually after sort of playing around with it a little bit, playing a couple of sort of like scuffed games on Teleshar, they're not quite up to date yet with all the bugs and stuff. This is quite an interesting hero, and there's some cool things I think you can do.
Do you find yourself banishing cards that are coming in Dusk Till Dawn, or are you banishing some of the older Runeblade cards that we used to play in Chain?
So I think the one of the coolest kind of things you can do is definitely with the newer cards is, so let's take like these 2-cost ones. I mean, some of these 2-cost ones are really good. There's obviously the Majestic cards. I forget what they're. Bear with us. First week, Widespread Ruin and Widespread Annihilation, Widespread Destruction. So these Destruction's a 3-cost.
Definitely Delight.
Is a 4-cost. Yeah, and then I was going to say definitely Delight. That's the next one. I think that card's really good. Even like, is it? There's another 2-cost as well, which I'm forgetting. Wraith, Phantom Wraith. So basically, anyway, you get to banish a card, and then often maybe you don't do anything with that card. You might hold it for a turn where you want to utilize it to its maximum. You take a damage, but maybe you block out in that turn. The next turn you can still block with like 3 cards, banish your Runegate card that you can play, and then play it. So like the Widespread Ruin, for instance. That is really cool. That's a 1 card, 8 damage. Like that is a really good place to be. So I think that's kind of some of the coolest things you can do with Vincent.
Interesting. Yeah, I wonder, I think back to some of the most powerful things. Well, the unassuming powerful things that Chain did, which people didn't really give the hero credit for, which was block with most of its hand, then play non-attack action, swing the blade, which is now Rosetta Thorn, which is, that card is effed. Yep. So, is that something you might be able to consistently do if you're able to put that attack action, into Blood Debt, sort of sit there over the course of a turn? You're banishing it as a cost of Vincent, but then later you banish the non-attack action. You effectively do that off of a single blue.
So I think your lower card hands actually have a slightly higher ceiling than what Chains did to a degree, especially early on in the game. But your bigger hands are not as good because you don't have this inbuilt hero ability of go again, and that so you have to have a card to do that, or creepers or whatever. So, but I think that's more balanced, obviously, and I think this can play well. Like this feels more mid-rangey than Chain. I think Vincent does. It feels a bit more like there's more setup aspects to it, which is interesting.
Interesting. Remind me, do you remember what the text of Dimensional Crossroads does exactly?
It doesn't work.
Damn it. You already looked at it, didn't you?
Well, so I think when I look at Vincent, you can't use the second ability is basically the problem. So, I mean, it does work. So, Dimensional Crossroads is if the first time you play a non-attack action from Banish, you deal 1 arcane damage to the opponent. So, you can deal up to 2, basically. 1 for non-attack, 1 for attack action if they play from Banish. But if you take any life loss during your turn, Dimensional Crossroads goes at the end of turn. So, you literally can't use that second ability instead. Sure. So, look, it might be interesting. It could be this kind of like reach sort of mechanic you use against more grindy matchups. But obviously it means that you kind of have that inbuilt by being able to force through arcane damage. So,
No, you're right. Live theory crafting. I think we've confirmed it sucks.
It's always the toughest thing to do. All right, should we get in and talk about some cards anyway? I mean, the first thing I have a question for you is like, let's start with Livia. They're at the top of the shadow cards, I guess. So Hellhammer. This card is quite cool and quite interesting. I think this is the rare Shadow Brute weapon. It's a hammer, two-handed. It's a once per turn action, 2 resources attack. And this is when the combat chain closes. If it attacked, you banish it. But it is a 6 cost. So it's 6 power. So it does count for Livia. It will fulfill Livia's ability. So you can attack with this only once, obviously. It'll go to banish, but then it's going to trigger Livia's hero ability. So, it's not irrelevant, basically. Card's interesting.
So I thought the card was bad because of the context of like this new pseudo Blood Rush Bellow that was printed. What is it called? Blood Dripping Frenzy. I figured that you would just want claws in this deck because claws is effed in all brutes, but Blood Rush Bellow, claws, now Blood Dripping Frenzy with claws because you can plex. But yeah, you're a brute and shadow attacks, so it works. Yeah, so that's more what I figured. Hellhammer, it looks more like a blitz card, if anything, to me. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Think? And I'm not saying you're definitely playing Hellhammer. I just think the card is interesting. The fact that you can trigger, obviously, your Livia hero ability by attacking with it. You can be in this kind of tight spot where you're trying to set up for a following turn. You've had to block out. You need to turn off Blood Debt. Here's my Hellhammer turn.
Well, I have a question for you. 6. Because I brought it up, talk to me about Blood Dripping Frenzy. Is that a card that you're excited about?
So I'm getting a bit more excited about it. When I first saw this card, I know people were like, oh, this is, Blood Rush Bellows 2.0. It's nuts. My take was, okay, so I have to pitch to play this. It's going to take up, even if I pitch a blue, I have 1 resource left after this, and I have to play this card. So I'm already down 2 cards, basically, before I get any effect. And then I have to banish 6 powers and able to, to be able to actually get this ability. So obviously the best to banish with that is like the Slithering Shadowpede, which we'll talk about. I think that might be the best card in the set for Livia. Or Deeper Root Evil to get value out of it. But let's just say I have a 4-card hand. I pitch my blue, I play my Blood Dripping Frenzy, I banish 2 6 costs, I get to draw back 2 cards. Now my attack, I have 2 cards in hand, and my attacks are getting +2 this turn. It's like I've paid 2 cards for +4 probably. I don't know, it's not really where I want to be. So I think it has to be on like these really big turns where you get massive value out of this, comboing it with other cards. 5-card hand, 6-card hand, banishing, Slithering Shadowpedes and Deeper Root Evils to make sure you get the value off of the cards you banish. I think that's kind of going to be where you need to be. But I mean, look, it's a blue. Blues, blues that have upside are always good. It blocks 3. So I think it's hard for this card to be poor. I think it's just going to be a lot harder for people to realize the ceiling of this card than maybe they think.
Yeah, it's always very helpful to sort of break down the math that way, especially when you're talking about it in contention with something like Blood Rush Bellow. What are your thoughts about Diabolic Offering? Diabolic Offering, Shadow Brute. Attack action. It has star for attack and defense. Cost 1 is a blue. And it says, if a card with 6 or more has been put into your banish zone this turn, Diabolic Offering's attack and defense are 6. Otherwise, they are 0. And it has Blood Debt. Do you think this card is good?
The first thing I thought about this card is the implication of getting it to 6 defense.
Yes,
right?
Of course. I mean, of course. So, everybody, that was like the first thing.
So Art of War defensively becomes more of an interesting option in Livia, for instance, right? Because now all of a sudden it's like, okay, I buff my attacks and banish a thing, draw 2 cards. So maybe I'm playing Tunic. Maybe I can replace my 2 cards and then it gets blocked for 7 off of 1 card. So I'm up, like +4. That's pretty cool. And then maybe I also get to banish like a Deeper Root Evil or something that I can play next turn. I don't know. Deeper Root Evil, we are short on cards that are a 6 power that you can play, obviously, from banish for good reason, because they would be very, very good. So I don't know. I mean, this card's interesting. I think, you're going to have to be careful about how you use this card. Often it's going to feel pretty bad. So, it feels like a card that it's very varied in what it can do for you. And sometimes it's going to crush you, and sometimes it's going to feel really good. So I think it's going to depend on the build.
Yeah, the big question is just how to turn this into a 6 defense. I agree with you. I mean, there is a number one thing that comes to mind, of course, new card, Expendable Limits, Shadow Brute Defense Reaction, 0 for 4 at blue. But as additional costs to play this, you have to banish a card from your hand. If a 6 or more power was banished this way, you may play it for your banish zone during the next action phase. Yeah,
it's random card as well. Let's not forget on that.
True. Not targeted. That would be busted.
Yeah, the card is cool though. I really like. I mean, all these blues that have potential utility, things that you can do a little bit differently. All these deck building possibilities. All these blues are really cool. It makes you think, what is a defensive Livia deck looks like that just kind of pivots into some sort of combo deck. That's really interesting. It's a cool card again. This defense reaction, but it's not the highest on my list of cards I'm excited about.
Interesting. Yeah, a blue that's 0 for 4 and it allows you to play that card in the next action phase. It seems really good. I guess. Yeah,
that's random. That's the thing. That's always the caveat.
Yeah. If it wasn't random, it would be ridiculous, right?
Yeah, but in the right deck, where whatever you banish is probably going to be good. I mean, the other thing as well is like it's not like you lose the defensive value if you don't banish a 6 power. It's just that
Yeah, but you wouldn't trade. I mean, that would be a very expensive defect.
2 cards for 4 now.
Yeah, 2 for 4.
Now you're 2 cards for 4. I mean, the card that I want to highlight the most is probably Slithering Shadowpede. I mean, probably everyone's seen and can realize how good this card is, but obviously being able to just play this off of Art of War, off of your other banish effects from the new set like Ram Raider, for instance, Shade and Scream, whatever it might be. This card's obviously great. Might be the best Shadow Brute card in the set. So we don't have to dwell on that card too much. What are your thoughts on Death Hydra, the Shade and Death Hydra? The 13 power is a big number in that bottom left corner.
It's big, and of course it goes very well with the ethos of Levia Redeemed. Hayden, how am I supposed to evaluate? The biggest question is, how consistently with the new cards can Levia get it to a higher amount of blood debt to utilize cards like this, and maybe something even like Levia Redeemed without getting extremely punished by the deck it's playing against, right? Maybe Alexi that has put in more ice, I mean, that it felt like, I remember the older Levia decks, or Levia decks that at least existed sort of more recently, they could put out a lot of damage, but if they ever had to take like a 50-50 or some sort of random scenario and they didn't banish that blood debt and it was a blood debt based Levia deck, I mean, it was really bad for them.
Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing this set's really giving you is the ability to pack your deck full of blood debt cards and cards that have 6 power. Like you can easily play, I think, 40 to 50 cards that have blood debt. Maybe it means you have to skimp on blues, but there's some really good yellows, depending on, maybe it's a Hexagore build and yellows are fine, for instance. You're not focused on claws. So Shade and Death Hydra and those sorts of builds becomes really interesting as like this late game, just like 3 card 13 play. Like 3 card 13 is huge, but if you're taking damage off it, obviously that's not where you want to be. And it doesn't banish for you. So how are you also triggering Levia at the same time? Also important to note is like, if you Levia redeemed, this you don't want to play this card because your cards all lose blood debt. So you're taking 13 damage. So don't be doing that. Consumed though, on the consumed side, this is a bit more relevant. You can potentially play this from banish, have 1 million blood debt cards in your banish zone, play this for 2 blues effectively, you got a 2 card 13. That's more interesting to me. So yeah, Shade and Death Hydra. Sorry, just to recap, it's a yellow majestic. Attacks for 13, defense of 3, cost 6, has blood debt, and says when this attacks, it deals X damage to you, where X is 13 minus the number of cards with blood debt in your banish zone. So
yeah,
I think this card's really cool.
I was just thinking, do you play Ebb and Fold with it? So you Ebb and Fold, banish the card.
Essentially.
Yeah. I mean,
I think more likely you're playing this on Levia once you've Levia consumed. But
okay.
Or yeah, you're playing this in like a style where you have this really massive turn. You're like, Art of War, banish something else, give go again, come up with Shade and Death Hydra into Hexagore or something. Here's my 19 damage turn.
I feel like the Art of War stocks are going up right now. Sounds like it's facilitating a lot of the more busted stuff that you might be doing in Levia.
I've got one more little combo for you. What about Tear Limb from Limb into Shade and Death Hydra? 26 damage.
Consistent?
No, and I think it's 5 cards, but it's 26 damage. So
Any rares or commons that you want to talk about that stood out to you? There was some pretty good ones.
Ram Raider, definitely. I think this is, one of the sticking points sometimes for Levia can be, how do I get cards into banish, but then also use my hand effectively? Obviously, Dread Scream has been that. People played like 9 Dread Screamer. Art of War helps with that. But this Ram Raider now gives you another option, which is, so Ram Raider, if you haven't seen it, it's a 2 cost, 6 attack at red, 3 defense. It's a rare. It's a Shadow Brute action attack. It has blood debt, and it says an additional cost to play this, banish a random card from your hand. If a card with 6 or more power, attack is banished this way, it gets go again. So this is how you can go wide. You banish something like Shadowpede, you banish something like Deep Rooted Evil, you even just banish just you're just triggering Lever's ability. You get to come in with 6, and you can come with your weapon afterwards, or you can come in with something like a Graveling Growl, for instance. So you might have like Graveling Growl in Arsenal, maybe red. You have Ram Raider, a 6 attack and blue in your hand. You pitch your blue. Ram Raider comes in for 6. You banish that random card. You've triggered Lever's hero ability, so you're not going to take Blood Debt. Then you play your Graveling Growl. So you know what you had. It's that 4-card hand, blue thing. Yeah, I mean it's 4-card 13, so it's like slightly above rate or on rate, but it does also give you Levia's triggered ability. So it's interesting.
I think this is the clear standout if you've played Levia before as one of the cards you're looking at first is just a way to utilize Go again. Yeah, I mean everything else, all the other comments here kind of they're not bad. They're not bad in the ways they're stated, but they're requiring you to banish random cards from your hand. They're a little bit intensive on that end. What do you think about Battlefield Breaker? Because it doesn't require you to banish a card, but if you have with banished card 6 or more attack, it does get +1, and it does become 2-card 8, right?
Yeah, I think if you're trying to like fill your deck with Blood Debt cards for things like the new Demi Hero, for Shaden, for whatever it might be, you're going to be looking for these cards that can derive you some value. It's just going to be how much can you make this a 2-card 8? That's really going to be the question, because if you can't make it a 2-card 8 very often, you're probably better off playing something else. In that spot, maybe even as So I guess it just really depends on how much you need the Blood Debt, how much you can turn it into a 2-card 8. Those are going to be the main questions. Because there's other cards, right? Like there's cards that can have higher ceilings potentially. You've got like Shade and Swing, which is like a 1 for 7 that banishes. You've got the Tribute to Demolition, which is a 2-card that can turn into a 2 for 8. The Tribute to Legions of Doom, which can turn into a 2 for 9. Obviously, this also has to banish a card, but if you can get value off of that card in some way, shape, or form, becomes more appealing. Like tribute to the Legions of Doom. I think if you're into this kind of like potential trading kind of situation of cards, that's an interesting one.
Did you talk about Shade and Scream?
I didn't. I'm not sure about this card. I initially thought this card was going to be really good, for like, but there's so many cards that want to have you to have Shadowpeed or something like Deep-Rooted Evil that I just think, this is, if you lose the card, like say it's not a card you can then play from banish, it's not a Ghostly Visit or Shadowpeed or whatever, then you're a 2-card 5.
2-card 5, yeah. I think
bad.
I think that this card looks enticing at a first look, but you quickly realize as soon as you don't banish, best case scenario, it's like terrible. So I actually think this card looks like relatively unplayable, to be honest. I bring it up because it stood out to me at first, and I was like, actually, it looks really bad. So
I think Unworldly Bellows is going to be the better choice if you're looking for this kind of effect to go tall, so that you can, utilize your lack of action points a little bit better. I mean, I guess the cool thing you can kind of do with this is like, you can banish maybe, but you have to get a little bit lucky. Banish Deep-Rooted Evil, because again, it's a random card. But you hit the Deep-Rooted Evil, then you can play it off this for a 2-card 11 or 3. I guess it's 3-card 11, so it's not even that amazing. But maybe if you've got the action points, maybe you're on a Scabby's plan, you can like banish this. You banish Ghostly Visit or something. You get to come in with, I don't know, maybe you came in with Hexgore first, then you play this to banish the Ghostly Visit that's in your hand. You come in for 9, so you're like a 3-card 15. Like, that's really cool, but that's hard to do. So, yeah.
Can I transition to another card? Dimensional Vortex. So Dimensional Vortex is a pitchless card that costs 3. It's a shadow non-attack action. It says you may play this from your banish zone. If you do, it costs 2 less to play. It says each hero banishes a card from their arsenal, and it has Blood Debt. What are your thoughts on this card?
I don't like it.
You don't like it?
So there's so many cards in the set that don't have Go Again. There's so many non-attack actions, shadow class non-attack actions that don't have Go Again, fighting for action points. This might have a specific spot. I guess the initial thought is how is this play into Ranger? How can I? But it is a card, so you're trading a card for a card and an action point. I just don't know. Like, how are you even getting this into your graveyard or into your banish to start with? Like, is this maybe Vincent? Maybe this is more of a Vincent card. But yeah, I mean, this card is not particularly exciting to me.
Yeah, I just wonder in something like Vincent if it's I wonder if you're eating the Blood Debt. You have this card in your banish zone. If your opponent does avoid Arsling just for threat of activation, I think not, because you still have to pay 1 for it.
Just play Command and Conquer.
You think so?
Just play Command and Conquer. I don't know, man. Like, I don't like this card. But.
This card, yeah, I'm interested to hear other people's thoughts on it. This card got me excited, especially in the context of, Lexi potentially being the best deck as we head into the new format.
I don't even think this is that good against Lexi, so we'll see. I think this is better against a deck that's like specifically setting up one card in Arsenal that's like the be-all, end-all of a setup. Like a Sonata from an old Scalata deck, for instance. I mean, any other cards you want to... Should we start talking about some Vincent cards?
Sure.
I think, my question was going to be like, is anyone playing Flail?
I don't think so. It's garbage, right?
So Flail of Agony, this is the Shadow Runeblade weapon. One of the first cards we saw is one-handed. It's a Vincent specialization as well. Once per turn action, one life attack. And when this hits, create a rune chant token. So obviously, this is no resources to attack with it, but it doesn't have go again. It's one attack, and it has to hit to create the rune chant. So, the one thing I think that the reason this looks kind of cool is the play pattern I was talking about a little bit earlier, where you're like, okay, maybe I block out with my hand. My turn, I have nothing to do, but I can actually pay a resource to Flail here to either buy a card or get a rune chant. That rune chant for next turn is going to help me play my rune gate cards easier. So the value of this attack could actually be around 3. That's pretty good. It just depends, like, is it good enough, especially when you're looking at things like Rosetta Thorn.
Yeah.
I think the Flail is better than people think it is, though. That's what I want to say. I think people think Flail is complete and utter garbage, but I think Flail of Agony is actually playable. It's a very different way to think about the card. I think it's about the value it provides for you for your rune gate, for how you set up future turns, and for the fact that when you have nothing to do, like when you are committing all your cards for whatever reason, because you have to banish, even if you have one card in hand, this is something that you can be doing.
Fair enough. I did completely write it off immediately after seeing it, so I think that it's valuable to talk about, even if it is maybe less powerful than Rosetta Thorn. It does have some sort of use case. Like it's better than people think, at least. Hayden, we talked about Levia by talking about Levia Redeemed first, so I want to talk about Vincent by talking about Oblivion first, which is a Shadow Runeblade instant, majestic, 0 cost, blue pitch, legendary Vincent specialization. Play this only if you control exactly 6 rune chants. Create, Nareth, the Soul Howler token. So this is like a callback to, Shane Blasphemeth.
Yeah.
Nazareth, there it is. It was just hard to see on my computer. Nazareth
with awesome art, by the way.
Yes, Nazareth, the Soul Harvester, Shadow token, Demon ally, 6 attack, 6 life, once per turn action, 0 attack. When Nazareth hits a hero, banish a card from their soul. If the light card is banished this way, gain 1 life. So, I mean, let's just evaluate this card as if it was textless. I think that's fair enough, right? What do you think? I mean, it could be good, right? If back in the day when Chain was at the height, Prism was a popular card, and you would actually place that that 6 popper that if it did hit them, it would banish a card from soul. Like it's not nothing, but I think to fairly evaluate the card, we need to evaluate it if it was techless. What do you think about this ally? Do you think it's going to be a primary game plan of Vincent?
I want to start either forward or backwards on this card, just so we can kind of evaluate a little bit and then answer that question. Because I think Eclipse was like really relevant in Chain, but it was relevant because of fatigue, because it gave you card value, right?
You wouldn't just put it in your deck, right? You could theoretically, you could sort of randomly pull it off, but ultimately it was a setup card. But
why didn't you put it in your deck? Because it didn't block 3, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Similar problem here. But I would say that the thing with this is it's potentially easier to set up because of the fact of like a card like Revelant Runeblood, for instance. This card could potentially be easier to set up. I just think it's still not that easy to set up. It doesn't block again. It's still an instant. So what's the kind of like overall value of Nazareth? Then you have to go to that, and it's like, okay, like a 6-power weapon, which is basically what it becomes into, right? Is good. And it means that you can do a lot of the things like, you banish at the start of your turn with the card. Then you can like play the non-attack action into, maybe you have ability to get go again off something like a Movrian Skies from Arsenal. So your Rune Gate attack comes in. Then this, you can have some like really big like 2-card or 1-card or 2-card effective because you're banishing 2-card like 12 damage turns, things like that. But it's really hard to set up. So I just don't know. And honestly, like you said, this text, you said textless, but the light card sort of when this, hits a hero with a card in their soul, like they can just 2-card block it, right? So, and then they can just kill it.
Yeah.
And it's easy for things like Prism to kill.
I just wonder if you can frequently get 12 points of value out of it by attacking and then having it killed by the opposing hero. One caveat I would do is like maybe one of the easy ways to pull this off is by like read the runes or something, which will consume your action point, in which case you would not be able to attack with it. What do you think about Spellbound Creepers as we head into this new age of Vinset?
Seems like they should be really good. I think.
Right. Like
because you can force to keep the creepers around, so it seems like it should be very good. And action points feels like the thing that you're kind of lacking a little bit with Vinset.
Exactly. Seems like the default boots for Vinset, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So no, I'm interested to see Nazareth. My feeling is actually this is going to be more relevant than Eclipse to the hero as a total, but in which ways and depending on how the build. Because this feels more mid range to me, I think an ally is more enticing, personally. So we'll see. I mean, we already talked about some of these RuneGate cards. Obviously, you know, Banshee was the first one we saw, but I think the kind of standout is Deathly Delight. We were actually talking last night. Dan kind of pointed this one out to me in terms of, you know, it's at red. Deathly Delight is a 2-cost Shadow Runeblade action attack at rare, at defense of 3, it attacks of 5 at red, has RuneGate, and says when the combat chain closes, gain life equal to the number of heroes who have lost life this turn. Has Blood Debt, of course. So, you know, it's like, okay, well, if I use my hero ability to force through a damage, I take a damage, but they take a damage. I get that 2 life back. So, you know, you're looking at netting out at a 2 for 6 with RuneGate that forces through damage. Like, that's a pretty cool card, I think, and potentially good at blue, red, probably not yellow, but yeah, I mean, these RuneGate cards they're purposely balanced because they're really powerful. But, you know, these majestic ones, I got hit by Annihilation in a sort of like small game we're playing the other day, and I was like, this card is so annoying. So Widespread Annihilation is the blue majestic Shadow Runeblade action attack, costs 4, attacks for 6, defensive 3, has RuneGate, and says when the combat chain closes, each hero who has lost life this turn banishes a card from hand. Like, this card is so annoying. Like, it basically commits you into Vinset to like just kind of blocking out the turn unless you have a good card as maybe someone like a Shadow Hero to banish, because like, unless you were able to block out their whole turn beforehand, like, they're only going to play this after they leak damage anyway. So you're like, okay, well, I'm forced to block this out now. Like, you can just almost always lose value on this card. It's really annoying.
This card is ironic because this is the actual Vinset staple. It's not Chains of Mephetis. It's Widespread Annihilation.
No, of course not. It's this one.
Yeah. What do you think about RuneGate as a mechanic? Cheating on resources after jumping through
cool,
hoops. Yeah. Do you think it's potentially do you think it's going to be? Does it have the potential to be a very powerful ability because you're cheating on those resources?
Yeah, 100%. Anytime you can cheat resources, right? Like, that is huge. We know that. Yeah. But and we've seen it elsewhere, of course. But I think, you know, the way that RuneGate works, and with Vinset's hero ability and it being harder to potentially get cards into banish, and you needing these rune chants and being able to only do it basically once per turn. So that's the thing, is like, reduction effects are really powerful, especially when you can abuse them in a row, like in really big turns. You know, you look at Chain, right? And you effectively could like play with extra cards from hand, and you can play as many as you want per turn. The reduction effect that you get on these RuneGate cards, it's really hard to get multiple, because you have rune chants start the turn, you come in with your RuneGate card, and then when you're getting your other rune chants from, so like Revelant Runeblood is a good one potentially, but like elsewhere it's really difficult. So I think it's quite balanced. I think they've done quite a good job sort of mechanically with it.
What are your thoughts on Funeral Moon and Requiem for the Damned? These non-attack actions without go again, you know, that can exist in your banish zone, and then if a hero has lost life, you may play it as though it were an instant.
So I think it's really going to come down to what the decks you end up playing look like. But because you can force through this damage with Vinset, you know, you can make sure that you can play these cards, and obviously being able to play something like Requiem for a Dream at instant speed is really good to create that Eloquence token. That's the way that you can do some of these sort of crazier turns. You know, give your Read the Runes go again. Like, that's pretty good, right? Yeah. With the Eloquence token. So really so Requiem for the Damned, this is the 0 cost Blood Debt. Non-attack action, defense 3, which is also super relevant as well. You can play it from your banished zone, and if a hero has lost life this turn, you may play this as though we're instant. So you can obviously make yourself, you just make yourself lose life, but obviously that's going to force through damage on them anyway. Create the Eloquence token. Yeah, Requiem for a Damned is, I think, a really interesting card, and I think one that's going to enable some like setup for some pretty big turns as well, but also has the kind of upside of just being able to block if you need to. You can also just hold some of these cards sometimes, like, you know, taking a few damage over the course of the game is probably fine. Funeral Moon, I think, is interesting as well. You know, this one I don't want to hold. Like, Requiem for the Damned, for instance, I'm okay to hold because it potentially sets up a turn, like a really big turn. just creating a rune chant is way less exciting to me. Like I want to make sure I can, like the turn I banish this, I want to be able to play it, and all it does is create a rune chant. This one is, Funeral Moon is a little bit less exciting to me.
Okay, so we use. So I'm just thinking about this in casting Oblivion with Grasp of the Arknight, Funeral Moon, and Vincent's ability. Right? Is that a somewhat easy way to cast Oblivion? That's how you get up to 6 rune chants. You lose the life off of Vincent's ability. You're able to play Funeral Moon. You effectively then you grasp. You're up to 2 rune chants, and then read the rune. Wait, read the runes is only 3 because I'm so used to playing Viscera. I've only played it in Viscera. I was counting it as 4 in my brain. That's hilarious. Yeah, so I was thinking about the value of 6, right, as the rune chant, and I think they've chosen that very specifically as just because it's one away from the sort of the obvious choice of how you would cast this card.
You could, yeah, I think so too. Which was kind of the funny thing about Eclipse as well. Eclipse felt kind of similar as well in that regard. The number of Blood Debt cards, it felt it was like just 1 or 2 higher than you would want it to be. I think though, a card that sort of might be really good as well is the one that makes a rune chant at the start of each of your turns.
Oh, yeah, where you take it down. Jesus Christ,
which I've definitely forgotten the name of.
Yeah,
but that card
costs 1, I believe.
Yeah, I can see the art on it. I just can't remember what it's called. But yeah, like that card is potentially really good for, that could get you to the 6. But again, this is now you're starting to get these really big setup sort of phases in order to just play this Oblivion, and then your opponent goes, okay, kill it. So like it really depends. But will Oblivion be free to play? I don't know. Like I say, I think it's going to be more relevant than Eclipse, just because the power level and what Vincent wants to do versus Chain is a bit more mid-rangey, for instance. So
yeah. I want to zoom out a bit. Between Levia and Vincent, which do you think has the more potential to be a top tier competitive hero? Is it Vincent with these Runegate cards and being able to cheat on resources, or is it Levia with access to this the Shadow Demi hero, as well as just suite of upgraded cards as well that will fit right into that Levy deck? What are you feeling in terms of impact and power level between these 2 Shadow heroes?
I honestly don't know.
It's hard to evaluate, right? This is not how supplemental sets usually are. They're pretty cut and dry, right? Usually we just get some powerful cards, like a Miraging Metamorph, and it's just like, okay, Prism's better. But right now, it's like I feel like we just got a completely new class. It doesn't even feel like Levia, to be honest. It's like completely new, and especially Vincent. Vincent is very hard to evaluate without actually playing the cards.
Yeah. Runeblood Incantation is the card I was thinking of, by the way.
That's it, yeah.
That Taxation. I think that Levia looks like it might have the ability to be more broken, potentially. Like there's this kind of like pathway to this potential kind of like really, really powerful deck. I think the downside always is the Levia hero ability, right? So it's like, is it easier to attack? That's kind of the question. On the flip side with Vincent, I think Vincent has the ability to be more consistent and just a better sort of player in the meta because of this ability to cheat resources and build your deck in kind of a more consistent way, I think. So consistency might lie with Vincent, but the power level might lie with Levia.
Interesting. Any other Vincent cards you want to talk about?
I want to talk about some shadow cards quickly, not Vincent cards, just kind of in the broad spectrum of things. Shrouds. So these are the shadow equipments if you haven't seen them. They have blood debt, they don't defend for anything, but they say if your hero would be dealt damage, you may just banish them to prevent 2 of that damage. There's a shroud, there's a cloak, there's a grasp, there's a dance of darkness. So head, chest, feet, arms, basically. I think the grasp of darkness is really interesting in Levia in particular because you don't have a great arm spot outside of gamblers, and if you're going to be on a Who's plan, then this is basically a 2 defense card. This is a Blade Break 2 almost, right? That's pretty cool, and it's a Blood Debt card that can fuel things that you might need.
Helps you get Levia redeemed as well. We talked about 13 being a little too much, and
Yep. So that those cards are really interesting to me, and sort of their widespread appeal of they can stop arcane damage as well, Brendan. So they're kind of like spell void a little bit.
I realized that.
It's not attack damage, so they can kind of act like spell void basically as well. So that card's pretty good. Dabble in Darkness. This is the 0 for 5. Again, some really interesting art on this card. It's a majestic 0 for 5, defense for 3, attack action, shadow attack action. Has blood debt, and it says when this attacks, banish the top card of your deck. This gets minus X attack, where X is the pitch value of the card banished this way. This card looks like it could be, it's like, is it's called Dabble in Darkness. This is the Rabble, sort of thing, but doesn't have Go Again.
Feels worse. I know it blocked for 3, but I don't know. I'm honestly not a fan. I'm not a fan of this card.
Yeah, so that card's interesting. I think there might be some applications with Levia Consumed, though. And then Hungering Demigon is like, this feels like the card they were like, okay, let's just make sure we've got a card that both the Shadow decks can play to really piss off Prism players. So it's a 2 for 6 at red, defense for 3, and has Blood Debt, and says if an opposing hero has 1 or more cards in their soul, you may play this from your banish zone. And when it hits a hero, banish a card from their soul. Card's pretty good, I think.
Yeah. I just, is it going to be as niche as the last time we saw one of these cards be playable and it was actually a shadow attack action? I think it'll be. Yeah, I have a hard time seeing people actually having space to include this in their deck unless like one of the light heroes is like actually disgustingly broken, like just overwhelmingly the best deck.
There's 2 other cards I want to quickly touch on. That's Beseech the Demigon and Tear Through the Portal.
I'm so happy we're talking about Beseech the Demigon. Okay. Go ahead.
I'll just quickly read them. So they're both shadow non-attack actions. They both cost 0. I'm going to read the red for each. So Beseech the Demigon is choose an attack action card in your banish zone. It gets +3 attack until end of turn. It has Go Again. And Tear Through the Portal at red is choose a red action card in your banish zone. It gets Go Again until end of turn. And the card has Go Again itself. That goes down yellow and blue. Each do the color representative. What do you think of these cards?
I think Tear Through the Portal is a good card.
Could you just play, Lead the Charge?
Could you just play Lead the Charge? Yep.
So that's my other question. Like, I think these cards on the surface.
Bro. Why does that always happen?
But they're shadow, which is not irrelevant.
I literally just scrolled up. And I was like, okay, why do we want this to be shadow?
But I think
sensibility. There we go.
Yeah. So the fact they're shadow is interesting. They also, it's like nimblism. Like the Beseech is like nimblism, except there's no downside on it. It doesn't have to be a 1 cost or anything. Same with Tear Through the Portal. There's no like resource constraint, like cost constraint rather. It's just the color constraint of the cards. So like these cards are slightly better potentially because of the constraint they have on them. So it might work out better in some decks potentially. So it's hard. Like, for instance, Captain's Call doesn't work on 3 costs, whereas this card can work on a 3 cost to give Go Again. Beseech can work on it.
Yeah, it seems.
Yeah,
I mean that card seems playable.
Yeah, so we'll see. I just think they're interesting cards, and I think we might see them in some way, shape, or form because of the flexibility they have. Even though they look really specific because of Banish Zone, they actually have a lot more flexibility. I think because of the fact they don't have these constraints on what the card that you can target is as much.
Mm-hmm. How much do you think you're going to be playing cards like Riftbind, in Vinset, like these old cards that can sit in your banish zone? You can banish them with invincibility and utilize them at a later time.
So I could be completely wrong here, and I'm open to it. Like I've only, as I say, just kind of from theory crafting and looking at the cards and sort of goldfishing a couple of games, things like that. Vinset is not chain. You are not doing these kind of crazy big combat chains like you were. And again, could be wrong. My interpretation of what this hero is going to look like is more value based. It's more about this kind of what you might call like a mid-range game. So I think a card like Refine is much less exciting. You're much more interested in room gate cards and non-attack actions that can gain you value. So I think even Seeds of Agony is like, how good is that card? So yeah, I think it's like I say, it's not chain.
Yeah, Seeds of Agony doesn't get me too excited, to be honest. It's more about parking attack actions down there. Hell from Beyond is also something that gets me probably the most excited.
That card I'm more excited about.
Okay. Yeah. Any other brute cards? Maybe the sort of generic brute cards or the Ringblade cards you want to talk about? I mean, we talked about it a little bit at the start of the show, but Bequest of Vast Beyond, the Viscera specialization, which is Scarlata on a card that blocks for 2, costs 0.
It's not though, is it?
But yes, there was a comma there, by the way, but it only hits attack actions. I genuinely believe that this card would have been powerful, but still balanced if it said not attack actions, because Scarlata that you have to draw is still a great card, but not busted. I digress. Hayden, do you see yourself playing Bequest of Vast Beyond? Like, I see Bequest of Vast Beyond as like something you're playing like very mid-rangey, right? To maybe reduce something down by like 2, not where you're like trying to cheat out a 9th blade or something consistently with this. What do you think?
Yeah, it's hard. So, like, if you played this on and you wanted to play, say, like a 3-cost attack, it doesn't matter what the 3-cost attack is. I can't, think of one specifically. But let's say it's a 3-cost attack that doesn't already have reduction.
Yeah.
So you play this. It's going to create half a rune chant for you, right? That's relevant. Let's say you have 2 rune chants, so you can make the thing cost 1 less. Sorry, 2 less, so it only costs 1. This card isn't completely terrible. You've gotten some like reasonable value out of it, but could it have been better? It's just like a blue 3 block is kind of the question at that point. So I don't know. This one's interesting. I'm keen to see like ways people might be able to make this work. Maybe there's some really cool stuff. You can double reduce on something like Ninth Blade with this. It's the same way Skalata worked. So you get to 4 rune chants and now it costs 1 with this card, for instance. Like that's potentially quite cool. But the last thing I want to say is the card I'm more interested in is Runic Reckoning.
Okay,
I think this card is really good. So this is the Runeblade action. It defends 3, first of all, which is great for a Runeblade non-attack action. It costs 1. That's majestic at red. It says this costs 1 less to play for each rune chant you control, and the next Runeblade attack action card you play this turn gets +3. This is like Nimblism +++. Like, this card is so good.
Good at Vinset, right? Too, because you'll pretty much
good
always have that rune
Viscerai.
chant. Yeah, Viscerai is like a pretty Viscerai. It makes a lot of sense because you're going to have that singular rune chant a lot. But Vinset also creates that rune chant pretty much off the bat. So this is just consistently a 0 for 3. Let's go again. That blocks for 3, which doesn't exist.
Yep, I think this card is really, really good. So I'm excited to play a bit of Runeblade.
Is this the most obviously powerful card in the set? I think it might be. I think this might be the clearest like slot in, and just like
it's the card that's like a clear upgrade, right? Like that
feels like an Everfest card. It feels like a Revel and Runeblade or Miraging Metamorph. It's just like, yes, this just goes in my decks. It's great.
Carapace is up there as well. So this is the Daedic Carapace, which is the Runeblade equipment chest. That has Arcane Barrier 2, Temper, and Defense for 2. That card is very good.
Pumped the Runeblade just anti-wizard stuff. Like they
don't want us playing Kano now.
They are equipped. Jesus Christ. What about these brute cards? I mean, we talked about your headpiece, but anything to talk about in regards to Numbskull or Dig Up for Dinner? And I know Rugged Roller probably just pisses you off.
I mean, Rugged Roller is what it is, right? Like, chuck it in your KO deck, enjoy. Numbskull is really interesting, and I think it's a sideboard card. It's really good against Ice in particular. It's really good against Ice Eternal because it doesn't, you can pop all those Frostbites and it only costs you 2 resources. But, I mean, where is this going to find a spot? I don't really know. I honestly, my first take is like Icelander and Lexi against those decks, and other than that, I'm not sure even against Lexi if it's going to find enough spot unless decks go really heavy ice. Dig Up for Dinner. People are really excited about this card.
Interesting.
I think it's kind of whatever because my deck like
too much. I don't know.
Well, yeah. So it costs 1. You get to shuffle up to 3 cards back into your deck. Has Go Again, which is important, and for each card with 6 more attack, you gain a life, right? And you banish the card. But my kind of problem with this is like, my blues are really competing. Like, first of all, I need 6 attacks in my deck. So any blue I play that's not a 6 attack, obviously, it needs to be really, really good and add value. And I just think in Rhinar, I want those to be Intimidate cards. And in Levia, I want those to be probably Blood Deck cards. So, yeah, I'm not sure on this card. But, people seem to be high on it. So we'll see. I've been a bit lower on it.
Hard to evaluate. It's been a while since I've played Brute. I haven't played Brute into the current meta. Most people haven't, to be honest. So it's like, is this a card that you can effectively utilize? Does it make sense to play this over some of your other blues? Because like you said, it's very competitive for that slot. I think ultimately it could be a decent sideboard slot.
Yeah, we'll see. Look, I mean, there's so many cards we didn't even get to cover in this. We're just trying to give it, both of us haven't had a chance to dive fully into this, but we wanted to give some views of Shadow cards, the Brute cards, the Runeblade cards, and kind of where we see starting with Vincent and also starting with Levia. I'm excited to brew more with them. We're going to do some brewing with some light heroes this week as well, so that next week we can talk about Prism and Bolton. I mean, there's a lot of cards in this set, and like we said, it's depth versus width, so there's a lot of things to potentially cover, and there's so many scenarios of what decks could look like, what strategies could look like. So, you know what, we definitely haven't covered everything here. We've definitely missed stuff. We probably have got some stuff a little bit wrong, but I think some of my base thoughts on Levia and Vincent, in particular some of the things that we just talked about, Brendan, I think we've got some good takes that people can maybe start to play around with in the coming weeks. Start to build some Levia and Vincent decks. Yeah,
so let us know where we're wrong in the comments below. I also want to hear your opinion on the set design of Dusk Till Dawn versus the set design of Dynasty, Everfest, etc. Like, what do you like more as a player? And then maybe add a little note in there and what kind of player you are. Are you a casual player, armory player, PT player, etc. I'm really interested because it's a huge pivot, and I mean, the success or failure of this set, I think, will determine the future design of Flesh and Blood supplemental sets.
Agree. Awesome. Well, that's it for me and Brendan this week, episode 117 of Arsenal Pass. We're going to change up roles here a little bit. We are both on Twitter, Brendan APG over there, and I am at Fian_Dale. Come and join the discourse for FAB Fitness Challenge. Very, very excited about it. Also, you can get involved in the the Arsenal Pass Discord as well as Twitter. We have Light coming next week on the pod, and we'll have a few things coming up on Patreon this month as well around Monarch with Draft kicking into full swing, plus some early decks that we're looking at for this format.
Can't wait.
Until next week.
Yeah. Thank you all so much. See you next week.